The morning sun cast long shadows across the construction site in suburban Phoenix, Arizona, where Maria Gonzalez stood watching the concrete foundation being poured. It was March 2018, and after 15 years of saving every penny from her job as a medical billing specialist, she was finally building her dream home. The desert air was crisp, carrying the scent of creosote and the distant hum of the city awakening. The sound of the concrete trucks rumbling across the desert lot filled Maria with a satisfaction she had never experienced before. Each load represented months of overtime shifts, skipped vacations, and dinners of rice and beans to stretch her budget just a little further. At 38, she had learned the value of patience and persistence in ways that her younger self could never have imagined. She pulled out her phone and took a photo of the workers smoothing the concrete, wanting to document every step of this miraculous transformation from empty desert to family home. The picture would join dozens of others in a folder she had labeled Our House, filled with images of land surveys, architectural drawings, and permit approvals that had taken months to secure. "Mija, are you sure about this location?" her mother, Carmen, asked, squinting against the bright Arizona sun. At 67, Carmen had weathered hands that told stories of decades working in hotel housekeeping, but her eyes still held the sharp intelligence that had helped her navigate life as a single mother raising 4 children. "It's perfect, Mom," Maria replied, her voice steady with conviction. "Close enough to the city for work, but far enough out that we can afford the land. Plus, look at that view." She gestured toward the distant mountains, their purple peaks rising majestically against the clear blue sky. The truth was, Maria had chosen this plot not just for its beauty or affordability, but because it represented something deeper. At 38, she had never owned anything substantial. Growing up in a cramped apartment in South Phoenix, she had watched her mother work multiple jobs just to keep food on the table. This house would be different. This house would be theirs. "I still think you should have bought something already." "Built?" her older brother, Rafael, interjected as he approached from his pickup truck. At 42, Rafael had always been the practical one, the one who questioned every decision with the skepticism of someone who had seen too many dreams crumble. His construction company had been struggling for years, and Maria knew he needed this project as much as she did. "Rafa, we've been through this," Maria said, her tone patient but firm. "Building from scratch means we get exactly what we want. Besides, you need the work, and I trust you more than any contractor in the city." Rafael's expression softened slightly. "You know I appreciate the business, Hermana. It's just, this is a big investment. You're putting everything you have into this." Maria nodded, understanding his concern. She had liquidated her 401k, taken out a construction loan, and even borrowed against her car. But she had also done her homework. She had spent months researching builders, studying floor plans, and calculating costs down to the last nail. "I've got it covered," she assured him. "The loan covers the construction, and I've got enough saved for the down payment. When we convert to a traditional mortgage, Mom will live with me, so we'll split the monthly payments. It's going to work." Carmen smiled, placing a weathered hand on her daughter's shoulder. "Your father would be proud," she said softly. "He always talked about owning land, about having something that belonged to us." The mention of her father brought a familiar ache to Maria's chest. Roberto Gonzalez had died of a heart attack when Maria was 25, leaving behind dreams unfulfilled and a family still struggling to find their footing in America. He had immigrated from Sonora with nothing but determination and a willingness to work 16-hour days in construction and landscaping. "He would be," Maria agreed, her voice thick with emotion. "And he'd probably have a million suggestions about the foundation." As if summoned by their conversation, Maria's younger siblings arrived. Sophia, 35 and perpetually dramatic, emerged from her Honda Civic with her teenage daughter, Lucia, in tow. Diego, the baby of the family at 32, pulled up in his Tesla, the gleaming car looking oddly out of place against the dusty construction site. "Jesus, Maria, this is really happening," Sophia said, her voice a mixture of awe and concern. I mean, I knew you were serious, but seeing it like this... She gestured at the concrete and steel framework that was beginning to take shape. Diego whistled low, his hands shoved deep in the pockets of his expensive jeans. This is going to be beautiful, sis. You've really thought this through. Maria felt a surge of pride at her youngest brother's approval. Diego had always been the smartest of them, the one who had gone to college and landed a job in tech. His success sometimes made her feel inadequate, but today, his admiration felt genuine and warm. Come on, let me show you the plans again, Maria said, pulling out the rolled blueprints from her car. She spread them across the hood, weighting down the corners with rocks. The house was modest by some standards, but felt palatial to Maria. 1,800 square feet, 3 bedrooms, 2 bathrooms, and an open floor plan that would accommodate their large family gatherings. The kitchen would have granite countertops and stainless steel appliances. The master bedroom would have a walk-in closet, something Maria had dreamed of since childhood. See? Mom's room is here, Maria pointed to the floor plan, with its own bathroom and a door that opens to the back patio. And this room here could be an office or maybe a guest room for when Lucia wants to stay over. 15-year-old Lucia looked up from her phone for the first time, actually seeming interested. Really, Tia? I could have my own room here? Of course, mija, Maria said, ruffling her niece's hair. This is going to be a home for all of us. Over the following months, Maria threw herself into the construction process with an intensity that surprised even her. She was on site every day after work, checking progress, asking questions, and learning everything she could about plumbing, electrical work, and framing. Her small Honda Civic became a mobile command center, filled with construction schedules, supplier catalogs, and thick binders of building codes and permit requirements. She kept a detailed journal of every decision, every expense, and every challenge that arose during construction. Each entry was dated and signed, creating a comprehensive record of her involvement in every aspect of the building process. At the time, she thought she was simply being thorough and organized, documenting the creation of something she hoped would last for generations. Raphael initially found her involvement annoying, but gradually came to appreciate her attention to detail. "You should have been the contractor," he joked one sweltering July afternoon as they stood in what would become the kitchen. "You know more about this house than I do." "I just want it to be perfect," Maria replied, wiping sweat from her forehead with the back of her hand. "This house has to last us the rest of our lives. Every choice we make now will affect how we live for decades to come." She had researched every material, from the type of insulation in the walls to the grade of concrete in the foundation. When the original electrical plan would have required an expensive upgrade to handle a future hot tub, Maria redesigned the layout to accommodate higher capacity wiring. When Raphael suggested a cheaper alternative to the dual-pane windows she had specified, Maria showed him energy efficiency calculations, proving that the higher upfront cost would pay for itself within 5 years. The construction wasn't without its challenges. In May, they discovered that the soil had more clay than expected, requiring additional foundation work that pushed them $3,000 over budget. Maria had to take a cash advance on her credit card to cover the unexpected expense, adding to the financial stress that kept her awake most nights. In August, a monsoon storm damaged some of the framing, causing a 2-week delay that threatened to push completion past the deadline for converting her construction loan to a traditional mortgage. Each setback felt like a personal attack on Maria's dreams, but she weathered them with the same quiet determination that had carried her through years of 12-hour workdays and night school to become a certified medical billing specialist. Carmen proved to be an unexpected asset during the construction. Despite her age, she insisted on bringing lunch to the workers every day, charming them with her homemade tamales and fresh agua fresca. Her presence on the site seemed to motivate everyone to work a little harder, a little more carefully. "Your mother is something else," Raphael told Maria one day, as they watched Carmen organizing tools with military precision. "She's got these guys wrapped around her finger." "She's always been like that," Maria replied with affection. Dad used to say she could make friends with a rattlesnake if she needed to. By October, the house was beginning to look like the vision Maria had carried in her mind for so long. The exterior was finished in warm stucco, the color of desert sand, with deep brown trim that reminded her of her father's work boots. The front yard was still dirt and rocks, but Maria could already see the landscape she would create. Native, plants that could survive the harsh Arizona summers, a small patio where she and her mother could sit in the evenings, maybe even a small vegetable garden. The first time Maria spent the night in the house, she lay awake on an air mattress in the master bedroom, listening to the settling sounds of new construction. Everything smelled like fresh paint and new carpet. Through the window, she could see the lights of Phoenix twinkling in the distance, but here in her new home, surrounded by the quiet of the desert, she felt a peace she had never experienced before. "We did it, Dad," she whispered to the darkness. "We finally did it." The house was completed in December 2018, just in time for Christmas. Maria insisted on hosting the family gathering in her new home, even though she only had a card table and folding chairs for furniture. The kitchen island, covered with a red tablecloth, became the centerpiece for their traditional feast of tamales, pozole, and her mother's famous tres leches cake. The smell of fresh paint still lingered in the air, mixing with the aromas of traditional Mexican dishes that had defined their family celebrations for as long as Maria could remember. She had installed speakers throughout the house, and mariachi music played softly in the background, creating the warm atmosphere she had dreamed of for so many years. "This is exactly what Papa would have wanted," Sophia said, momentarily setting aside her usual complaints and criticisms. She stood in the doorway between the kitchen and living room, watching their mother teach Lucia how to fold tamales properly. The 3 generations working together in the spacious kitchen that was larger than their entire childhood apartment. Diego was setting up his laptop in the guest room, already talking about using the space as a remote office when his company allowed work-from-home days. "The internet speed out here is actually better than at my apartment," he marveled, running speed tests and taking photos to post on social media. "To Maria," Raphael said, raising his beer bottle in a toast, "for having the courage to build something beautiful. To all of us," Maria corrected, looking around at her family gathered in the living room. "This house belongs to all of us. It's our sanctuary, our place to come together, our legacy." Sophia's eyes were wet with tears as she hugged her sister. "I'm so proud of you, Maria. You did something none of us thought was possible." Even Diego, usually reserved with his emotions, seemed moved by the moment. "This feels like home already," he said quietly. "Like it's been here forever." Carmen, sitting in the corner with Lucia curled up beside her, smiled with the satisfaction of a woman who had seen her children overcome obstacles she had never imagined they could conquer. "Your father is here tonight," she said simply. "I can feel him." As Maria looked around at her family in her new home, she felt the weight of accomplishment settling into her bones. Every sacrifice, every overtime shift, every sleepless night, worrying about money had led to this moment. The house wasn't just shelter. It was proof that dreams could become reality, with enough determination and faith. Little did she know that within 3 years, this sanctuary she had built with such love and sacrifice would become the center of a battle that would test everything she thought she knew about family, loyalty, and justice. The first sign of trouble came on a Tuesday morning in March 2021, almost exactly 3 years after Maria had first watched the foundation being poured. She was in her home office, reviewing medical billing reports for the cardiology practice where she worked, when she heard raised voices from the kitchen. "I'm telling you, Mom, it's not sustainable." Sophia's voice carried through the house, sharp with frustration. Maria's being selfish, keeping all of this to herself. Maria frowned, closing her laptop. Since the pandemic had forced her to work from home, she had gotten used to the rhythm of her mother's daily activities. But this conversation was different. There was an edge to it that made her stomach tighten with unease. she found Sophia and Carmen sitting at the kitchen island. Financial documents spread between them like evidence in a trial. Sophia's face was flushed with the particular anger that Maria recognized from their childhood arguments, the kind that meant she felt wronged and was preparing for war. "What's going on?" Maria asked, keeping her voice level despite the anxiety building in her chest. Sophia looked up, her brown eyes flashing. "We need to talk, Maria, as a family, about this house." "What about the house?" Maria asked, though she was beginning to suspect where this conversation was heading. Over the past year, as the world had changed around them, so had the dynamics within their family. Diego's tech job had allowed him to work remotely, and he had been spending more time at the house, using the guest room as an office. Sophia, whose hours at the dental clinic had been cut during the pandemic, had been relying more heavily on their mother for childcare, practically moving into the house on weekends. Raphael's construction business, meanwhile, had boomed as people invested in home improvements during lockdown. He had paid off his debts and bought a new truck, and lately Maria had noticed a change in his attitude toward the house he had helped build. "Sit down," Carmen said gently, patting the stool next to her. "Mija, we need to discuss some things." Maria remained standing, her arms crossed. "If this is about money, you know I've always been fair about expenses. Everyone contributes what they can." "That's just it," Sophia said, her voice rising. "We contribute, but we don't own anything. This house has appreciated so much in value, and we're just helping you build equity while we get nothing." The accusation hit Maria like a physical blow. "Nothing? Sophia, you've lived here rent-free half the time. I've watched Lucia whenever you needed, and that's not the point," Sophia interrupted. "The point is that we're family, and family should share in the benefits as well as the responsibilities." Maria looked at her mother, searching for support, but Carmen's expression was troubled and conflicted. "Mom?" Carmen sighed deeply, her weathered hands smoothing the papers on the counter. "Mija, your sister has some concerns that maybe we should consider." "What kind of concerns?" Sophia leaned forward, her voice taking on the persuasive tone she used when she really wanted something. "Look, I've been talking to some people, and legally, Mom has rights here too. She's been living here, contributing to the household, helping with the mortgage payments. She's been living here because that was always the plan," Maria said, her voice sharp. "And her contributions help with utilities and groceries, not the mortgage. I've been paying the mortgage myself." "But she's established residency," Sophia continued. "And Diego and I have been contributing to improvements and maintenance. We've all invested in this place." Maria felt the walls of her kitchen closing in around her. "What exactly are you suggesting?" "We think the house should be put into a family trust," Sophia said, pulling out a folder that Maria now realized had been prepared beforehand. "Equal shares for all 4 siblings and Mom. It's only fair." The audacity of the suggestion left Maria momentarily speechless. "Fair?" "I put down the down payment. I qualified for the loan. I'm the only one on the mortgage. I've been paying the property taxes and insurance. How is it fair to give away what I've worked for?" "You didn't do it alone," Sophia shot back. "Raphael built the house at cost, saving you thousands. Diego helped with the down payment when you came up short. I've been helping Mom with her share of expenses. We're all invested in this place." Maria's mind raced, trying to process what she was hearing. It was true that Diego had loaned her $5,000 when the construction costs had gone over budget, but she had paid him back within 6 months. Raphael had indeed built the house at cost, but that had been a business arrangement that benefited them both. "Even if any of that mattered," Maria said, struggling to keep her voice steady, "you can't just decide to take ownership of someone else's property. That's not how the law works." "Actually," Sophia said, pulling out more papers, "I've consulted with a lawyer. Given the circumstances, there are several legal avenues we could pursue. Adverse possession, constructive trust, quantum meruit. The legal terms hit Maria like stones. "You've been to a lawyer? About my house?" Carmen reached out to touch Maria's arm, but Maria pulled away. "Mija, we're not trying to hurt you. We just want to make things fair for everyone. Fair would have been having this conversation 3 years ago, before I took all the financial risk," Maria said, her voice cracking. "Fair would have been you taking out loans and qualifying for mortgages yourselves if you wanted to own property." "We couldn't qualify back then." Diego's voice came from the doorway. Maria turned to see her youngest brother standing there, dressed in his work-from-home uniform of designer sweats and an expensive t-shirt. "You know the bank wouldn't have given us the loans. So now that I've done all the work, you want to reap the benefits?" "We want to be partners," Diego said, his tone reasonable and calm in the way that had always infuriated Maria during arguments. "The house has doubled in value since you bought it. That's equity that we've all contributed to creating." Maria laughed bitterly. "I bought this house for $280,000. I've been paying the mortgage for 3 years. The property taxes have gone up by 40%. I've put in new landscaping, replaced the AC unit, fixed the roof leak after that hailstorm. Where were your contributions to those expenses?" "We've been living here, maintaining it, improving it," Sophia said. "Our presence has added value." "Your presence has added wear and tear," Maria shot back. "And food costs and utility bills and—" "Enough," Carmen said, her voice cutting through the argument with the authority that had kept their family in line for decades. "This is not how we solve problems." The kitchen fell silent, except for the hum of the refrigerator and the distant sound of a neighbor's lawnmower. Maria looked at each member of her family, trying to understand how they had gotten to this point. "Let me make sure I understand," Maria said slowly. "You want me to sign over ownership of the house I bought, that I qualified for, that I've been paying for, so that you can all become equal owners without having invested equal amounts. We want to formalize the family partnership that's already existed," Diego said. "Mom lives here full-time. Sophia and Lucia are here most weekends. I work from here 3 days a week. We're already functioning as a family unit." "A family unit that I'm financially supporting," Maria pointed out. "And we're grateful for that," Sophia said, her tone softening slightly. "But Maria, you can't expect us to just be tenants in what feels like our family home forever." The phrase, family home, hit Maria particularly hard. She had worked so hard to create a place where her family would always feel welcome, where holidays and birthdays and ordinary Tuesdays could be filled with the warmth she remembered from their childhood before her father died. But somewhere along the way, that welcome had been interpreted as ownership. "I need time to think about this," Maria said finally. "Of course," Carmen said, relief evident in her voice. "We don't need to decide anything today." But Sophia wasn't finished. "Actually, there is one more thing." She pulled out a final document from her folder. "We've already had the trust paperwork drawn up. We just need your signature." Maria stared at the papers, feeling as though she was looking at a death certificate for her dreams. "You've already had the paperwork drawn up? Before even talking to me about it?" "We wanted to show you that we were serious," Diego said. "That we'd thought this through." "You mean you wanted to present me with a fait accompli?" Maria said. "You wanted to back me into a corner so I'd have to agree." "We wanted to show you a solution," Sophia corrected. "A fair solution." Maria picked up the trust documents, scanning. The legal language that would effectively give away 3/5 of everything she had worked for. Her name appeared as the trustee, but the beneficiaries were listed as all 5 family members in equal shares. "I need to talk to my own lawyer," Maria said. "Of course," Diego said. "But Maria, don't take too long. This situation is causing stress for everyone, especially Mom." The implication was clear. Either agree to their terms, or be responsible for tearing the family apart. Maria looked at her mother, searching for some sign of support, some indication that Carmen understood what they were asking her to do. But Carmen's expression was tired and conflicted, and Maria realized with a sinking heart that her mother had already been convinced that this was the right thing to do. That night, after everyone had gone home or to their respective rooms, Maria sat alone in her living room, surrounded by the silence of the house she had built with such hope. She thought about all the decisions that had led to this moment. Choosing to include her family in every aspect of the house, making them feel at home, sharing her space and her dreams so completely that they had begun to see them as their own. She thought about her father and wondered what he would have done. Roberto Gonzalez had been a generous man, but he had also been practical. He had understood the value of ownership, the security that came from having something that couldn't be taken away. As she looked around at the home she had created, Maria realized that everything was about to change. The question was whether she would let them change it on their terms, or whether she would find the strength to fight for what was rightfully hers. The foundation was solid, but the family she had built on top of it was beginning to show cracks that might prove impossible to repair. Maria's attorney, Jennifer Walsh, was a no-nonsense woman in her 50s who specialized in real estate and family law. Her office in downtown Phoenix was decorated with diplomas and awards, but what impressed Maria most was the way Jennifer listened without judgment as Maria explained her situation. "Let me make sure I understand," Jennifer said, tapping her pen against a yellow legal pad. "You purchased the property with your own down payment. You're the sole borrower on the mortgage, and you've been making all the payments yourself for 3 years. That's correct. And your family members have been living in the house, contributing to utilities and groceries, but not to the mortgage, property taxes, or insurance. Right. And now they want me to put the house into a trust that would give them equal ownership shares." Jennifer leaned back in her chair, her expression thoughtful. "Maria, I'm going to be direct with you. From a legal standpoint, you have every right to refuse their demand. The house is your separate property. However, family law can get complicated when there are claims of implied partnerships or unjust enrichment." "What does that mean?" "It means that if your siblings can prove they've contributed to the property's value through improvements, maintenance, or other investments, they might have a claim to some compensation. But that's very different from equal ownership." Maria felt a small measure of relief. "So they can't just take my house?" "Not without a legal fight that they'd be unlikely to win, based on what you've told me. But Maria, I have to ask, what do you want to happen here? Do you want to keep the house and potentially estrange your family, or are you willing to consider some kind of compromise?" The question hit at the heart of Maria's dilemma. For the past 2 weeks, since the confrontation in her kitchen, the atmosphere in the house had been tense and uncomfortable. Sophia was barely speaking to her. Diego had moved his office setup to his apartment, and even her mother seemed distant and disappointed. "I want my family," Maria said quietly, "but I also want to keep what I've worked for. I don't think that's unreasonable." "It's not unreasonable at all," Jennifer agreed. "But sometimes families have different ideas about fairness and entitlement. Have you considered offering to sell them shares of the house at fair market value?" Maria had considered it, but the math was daunting. With the house now appraised at $580,000, even a 20% share would cost more than $100,000. None of her siblings had that kind of money readily available. "There might be other options," Jennifer continued. "You could formalize their living arrangements with rental agreements. You could set up a payment plan for them to purchase shares over time. The key is to maintain your legal position while finding a solution everyone can live with." After the meeting, Maria drove through her old neighborhood in South Phoenix, past the apartment complex where she had grown up. The buildings looked smaller and more run down than she remembered, their beige stucco walls cracked and faded. She thought about the cramped 2-bedroom unit, where 5 people had shared one bathroom, and a kitchen so small that only one person could cook at a time. The contrast with her current home was stark, and it reminded her why she had worked so hard to create something better. This wasn't just about money or property rights. It was about the security and stability she had never had as a child. When she arrived home, she found Raphael waiting in her driveway, leaning against his truck with his arms crossed. He looked tired, older than his 45 years, and Maria felt a pang of sadness for the brother who had once been her closest ally. "We need to talk," he said without preamble. "Okay," Maria replied, though she was already bracing herself for another confrontation. They sat on her front patio, the desert evening warm around them. In the distance, the mountains were silhouetted against a sky painted in shades of orange and purple, the same view that had convinced Maria to buy this land 4 years ago. "Sofia and Diego are talking about taking legal action," Raphael said. "I wanted you to hear it from me first." Maria's stomach clenched. "What kind of legal action?" "They're claiming that there was an implied partnership from the beginning. That the house was always intended to be family property, and that you're trying to back out of the agreement now." "What agreement?" Maria demanded. "There was never any agreement. I bought a house and welcomed my family to visit and stay as often as they wanted. That's not the same thing as entering into a business partnership." Raphael was quiet for a long moment, staring out at the desert landscape. "Maria, I need you to understand something. When I built this house, I did it at cost, because you're my sister and you needed help. But I also did it because I believed we were building something for the family. A place where Mom could live comfortably, where we could all gather, where our kids could have roots. And you've had all of that," Maria pointed out. "Nothing has changed except now you want to own it too." "Everything has changed," Raphael said, his voice heavy with frustration. "This house has become the center of our family, but you control everything about it. You decide who can stay and when. You decide what improvements get made. You decide the rules about guests and noise and everything else." "Because it's my house," Maria said. "Because I'm the one who's legally and financially responsible for it." "But it doesn't feel like just your house to the rest of us," Raphael replied. "It feels like our family home that you happen to hold the deed to." Maria could hear the pain in her brother's voice, and it made her own chest ache. "Rafa, I never wanted you to feel like guests here. This house was always meant to be a place where family was welcome." "I know that," he said, "but there's a difference between being welcome and having a stake in something. Mom's getting older, Maria. What happens to her if something happens to you? What happens if you get married and your husband doesn't want a house full of in-laws? What happens if you decide to sell and move somewhere else?" The questions hung in the air between them, touching on fears that Maria had never fully articulated. She was 38 and single, with no immediate plans for marriage, but she understood Raphael's concerns about their mother's security. "Would never leave Mom without a place to live," Maria said firmly. "I believe you wouldn't mean to," Raphael replied. "But circumstances change. People change. Legal documents don't." They sat in silence for a while, watching the last light fade from the sky. Finally, Raphael stood up, his movements slow and tired. "I don't want to fight with you, Hermana," he said, "but I don't think you understand how this looks from our perspective. You've built something beautiful, and we're all proud of you. But you've also built it in a way that makes the rest of us feel like we're always on the outside looking in." After Raphael left, Maria went inside to find her mother sitting at the kitchen table, a cup of tea growing cold in front of her. Carmen looked up as Maria entered, her eyes red-rimmed with exhaustion. "Mia, this has to stop," Carmen said. "This fighting is tearing our family apart." "I'm not the one who started this fight, Mom," Maria replied, taking the seat across from her mother. "Maybe not," Carmen agreed. "But you're the only one who can end it, by giving away half of everything I've worked for." Carmen reached across the table and took Maria's hands in her own. "By remembering that family is more important than property." The words stung because Maria could hear her father's voice in them. Roberto Gonzalez had always preached the importance of family loyalty above all else, but he had also taught her the value of hard work and the importance of standing up for herself. "What if they're wrong, Mom?" Maria asked. "What if giving in to this demand just encourages them to make more demands later? What if I set a precedent that my hard work doesn't matter as long as they want what I have?" Carmen was quiet for a long moment, her thumb rubbing against Maria's knuckles in the soothing gesture she had used to comfort her children since they were small. "Your father used to say that the hardest decisions in life are the ones where both choices will cause pain," Carmen said finally. "But he also said that you can always live with yourself if you choose love over fear." "And what if choosing love means enabling people to take advantage of that love?" Maria asked. Carmen didn't have an answer for that, and they sat together in the quiet kitchen, both lost in their own thoughts about family and loyalty and the complicated mathematics of love. The next morning, Maria woke to find a legal document taped to her front door. Her hands shook as she read the petition for partition and accounting that had been filed by Sofia and Diego in Maricopa County Superior Court. They were asking the court to recognize their ownership interest in the property and to either force a sale or compel Maria to buy out their shares at fair market value. The sight of her own address printed on official court documents made Maria's stomach clench with a mixture of fury and disbelief. Her siblings had transformed what she had always seen as a generous open-door policy into a legal claim of ownership. Every family dinner, every holiday celebration, every casual weekend visit was now being reframed as evidence of their right to her property. The legal language was dense and intimidating, filled with terms like constructive trust, quantum, meerwheat, and unjust enrichment that made her feel like she was reading a foreign language. But the message was clear. Her siblings were no longer asking for her cooperation. They were demanding it through the courts, backed by the power of the state to seize and partition her property if they prevailed. Maria called Jennifer Walsh immediately, reading the petition over the phone while pacing her living room, the same living room where she had hosted so many family gatherings that were now being used as evidence against her. "I was afraid this might happen," Jennifer said, her voice grim. "They're essentially claiming that an implied partnership existed from the beginning, and that the house was purchased for the benefit of the entire family." "Can they win?" Maria asked, though she wasn't sure she wanted to hear the answer. "It's possible, especially if they can produce evidence that supports their claims. Text messages, emails, witness testimony about conversations where family ownership was discussed. Arizona courts have sometimes recognized implied partnerships in family situations, particularly when there's evidence of shared investment and communal use." The implications hit Maria like a physical blow. Every text message where she had asked about someone's arrival time, every photo she had shared of home improvements, every casual conversation about future plans could potentially be twisted into evidence of shared ownership. Her generosity was being weaponized against her. "What do I do now?" "Now we fight back," Jennifer said firmly. "We file a response denying their claims and counterclaim for unjust enrichment based on their free use of your property. We gather evidence showing that you were always the sole intended owner." "And Maria?" "Yes?" "This is going to get ugly. Family legal disputes always do. Are you prepared for that?" Maria looked around her living room, at the family photos on the mantel and the comfortable furniture she had chosen with such care. Through the window, she could see her mother tending to the small garden they had planted together the previous spring. "I didn't want it to come to this," Maria said. "I know," Jennifer replied. "But now that it has, you need to decide whether you're going to fight to keep what's yours or let them intimidate you into giving it away." As Maria hung up the phone, she realized that the battle for her home had officially begun. The stakes were no longer just about property or money. They were about whether she would stand up for herself or spend the rest of her life wondering what would have happened if she had found the courage to fight. The foundation was still solid, but everything built on top of it was about to be tested in ways Maria had never imagined. The discovery phase of the lawsuit revealed just how long her siblings had been planning their legal challenge. Maria sat in Jennifer Walsh's office, going through boxes of documents that Sophia and Diego's attorney had been forced to produce, feeling as though she was reading about strangers rather than her own family. "Look at this," Jennifer said, holding up a printed email chain. "This goes back 18 months. Sophia was researching adverse possession claims before the pandemic even started." Maria read over her lawyer's shoulder, her heart sinking with each revelation. There were emails between Sophia and Diego discussing the house's increasing value, text messages about protecting our interests, and even a consultation report from a different attorney dated 8 months before their kitchen confrontation. "They've been planning this for over a year," Maria said, the betrayal hitting her like a physical blow. "It gets worse," Jennifer said grimly. "Look at this." She handed Maria a document that made her stomach drop. It was a quitclaim deed, already prepared and notarized, transferring Maria's property into a family trust. The deed was dated 3 months ago, though it had never been filed with the county recorder. "They forged my signature," Maria whispered, staring at the familiar-looking scrawl that was close to, but not quite, her own handwriting. "It's not filed, so no harm was done legally," Jennifer explained. "But this shows premeditation and fraud. This changes everything, Maria. We're not just talking about a family property dispute anymore. This is criminal fraud." The evidence painted a picture of calculated deception that shattered Maria's remaining illusions about her siblings' motivations. Bank records showed that Diego had been documenting every penny he spent on groceries or utilities at the house, creating a paper trail to support his financial contribution claims. Sophia had been taking photos of home improvements and maintenance work, building a visual case for her sweat equity arguments. Most damaging of all was a recorded phone conversation between Sophia and a potential witness, their cousin Elena, where Sophia coached her on what to say about conversations regarding family ownership of the house. "They've been building a legal case while pretending to be concerned about family fairness," Maria said, her voice hollow with disbelief. "I'm afraid so," Jennifer confirmed. "But Maria, this evidence also gives us everything we need to not only defend against their claims, but to go on the offensive. The attempted fraud, the perjury preparation, the bad faith filing. We can seek sanctions, attorney's fees, and even punitive damages." For the first time in months, Maria felt a spark of something other than anxiety and sadness. It was anger, clean and sharp, cutting through the fog of betrayal and hurt that had clouded her thinking. "What do you recommend?" "We file an amended response that includes everything we've discovered. We add claims for fraud, intentional infliction of emotional distress, and conspiracy. We make it clear that this isn't a good faith family dispute, but a calculated attempt to steal your property. Will that end this?" Jennifer smiled grimly. "Maria, when people realize they're facing serious legal consequences for fraud, they tend to become much more reasonable very quickly." The amended filing sent shockwaves through Maria's family. Within hours of the documents being served, her phone was ringing constantly. First Sophia, crying and claiming she had been manipulated by Diego. Then Diego, smooth and reasonable, insisting that everything had been a misunderstanding. Finally Raphael, angry and defensive, accusing Maria of escalating a family disagreement into a war. Maria let all the calls go to voicemail. The only person she agreed to see was her mother. Carmen arrived at the house that evening, looking frailer than Maria had ever seen her. They sat in the living room, the television muted, the silence heavy between them. "Mija," Carmen began, her voice trembling. "I had no idea about the forged papers. I swear to you I didn't know." Maria studied her mother's face, searching for any sign of deception. All she saw was genuine shock and remorse. "I believe you, Mom. But you did know they were planning to force me into signing over the house." Carmen nodded slowly, tears beginning to fall. "I thought..." I thought it was about fairness, about making sure everyone had security. I didn't realize they had been planning this for so long, or that they were willing to—" She couldn't finish the sentence. "Willing to commit fraud," Maria finished for her. "Willing to forge my signature and steal my property." "What happens now?" Carmen asked. "Now I fight back," Maria said simply. "And Mom, I need you to understand something. I love this family, but I won't let anyone, even family, steal from me. If that makes me the villain in their story, then so be it." Carmen reached for Maria's hand. "You're not the villain, mija. I see that now. I'm sorry it took me so long." Over the following weeks, the case began to unravel in Maria's favor. Faced with evidence of fraud and the possibility of criminal charges, Sofia and Diego's attorney advised them to settle. The negotiations were tense and bitter, conducted entirely through lawyers while the family remained fractured and silent. The final settlement required Sofia and Diego to withdraw their lawsuit, acknowledge Maria's sole ownership of the property, and pay her attorney's fees. In exchange, Maria agreed not to pursue criminal fraud charges, though she made it clear that any future challenges to her ownership would result in immediate prosecution. Rafael, who had not been directly involved in the fraud, apologized to Maria through their mother. He had genuinely believed in the family ownership concept, but once he learned about the forged documents and deceptive planning, he distanced himself from his siblings' actions. "He wants to know if he can still visit," Carmen told Maria one evening as they prepared dinner together. "He's ashamed of what happened, but he misses being here." "He's always welcome," Maria replied without hesitation. "He's the only one who was honest with me, even when we disagreed." The legal victory, however, came at a tremendous personal cost. Sofia refused to speak to Maria at all, and Diego's communication was limited to cold, formal exchanges when necessary. Family gatherings became things of the past. The house that had once been filled with laughter and conversation now felt empty despite its familiar furnishings. But as the months passed, Maria began to find a different kind of peace. Without the constant tension and underlying resentment that had characterized the previous 2 years, she was able to enjoy her home in ways she had forgotten were possible. She could make decisions about decorating, improvements, and daily routines without considering multiple opinions and conflicting desires. The silence that had initially felt oppressive gradually became restorative. Maria rediscovered the simple pleasure of coming home to a space that was truly her own, where she could control the temperature, choose the music, and decide when to have guests without navigating complex family politics. She began renovating the guest room that Diego had claimed as his office, transforming it into the art studio she had always wanted, but never had space for. The room filled with canvases, easels, and the smell of oil paints, as Maria rekindled a passion for painting that she had abandoned during college to focus on more practical concerns. The walls of the studio soon displayed landscapes of the Arizona desert, portraits of her mother, and still lifes of the succulents that thrived in her backyard garden. Each painting represented a reclamation of creative energy that had been suppressed during years of family conflict and financial stress. She began dating again, something she had avoided during the years when her house was constantly filled with family members. She met David at a community college art class, a divorced teacher who appreciated both her independence and her strong family values. When she told him the story of the house and the legal battle, he was impressed rather than intimidated by her strength. "You stood up for yourself when it mattered most," he said over dinner one evening at a small Mexican restaurant in downtown Phoenix. "That takes real courage. A lot of people would have just given in to keep the peace." "I lost my family in the process," Maria replied, twirling pasta around her fork while avoiding his eyes. "No," David said gently, reaching across the table to touch her hand. "You lost people who were willing to steal from you. Your real family. Your mom, Rafael, your niece. They're still here. And honestly, Maria, anyone who would try to defraud you isn't family worth keeping." He was right. Lucia, now 18 and starting college, still spent weekends at the house. She had been horrified by her mother's actions and had chosen to maintain her relationship with Maria despite Sofia's disapproval. Raphael visited monthly, usually bringing his new girlfriend, who fit seamlessly into the smaller but healthier family dynamic. Carmen, now 71, had become Maria's closest confidant and advisor. The crisis had strengthened their relationship in unexpected ways, forcing them to communicate more directly and honestly than they had in years. "I'm proud of you, mija," Carmen told Maria one evening as they sat on the back patio, watching the sunset paint the mountains purple and gold. "Your father would be proud too." "Even though I fought with family?" Maria asked. "Especially because you fought with family," Carmen replied firmly. "He always said that sometimes the people who love you most are the ones most likely to take advantage of that love. You didn't let that happen." 2 years after the legal settlement, Maria received an unexpected visitor. Sofia stood on the front porch, looking older and more worn than her 40 years would suggest. She had lost weight, and there were lines around her eyes that spoke of stress and regret. Her usually perfect makeup was minimal, and her clothes hung loosely on her diminished frame. The sight of her sister after so much silence was jarring. Maria's first instinct was to close the door, to protect herself from whatever new manipulation or guilt trip Sofia might have prepared. But something, in her sister's posture, the way her shoulders slumped with defeat, rather than bristling with entitlement, made her pause. "I know I have no right to be here," Sofia said when Maria opened the door. Her voice was hoarse, as if she hadn't been sleeping well. "But I needed to see you. I need to tell you some things, and I don't know if I'll have the courage to say them if I wait any longer." They sat in the living room where so many family meetings had taken place, the air between them thick with history and hurt. The afternoon light streaming through the windows illuminated the dust motes floating between them, making the silence feel heavy and fragile at the same time. "I want to apologize," Sofia began, her voice barely above a whisper. "Not just for the lawsuit, but for everything. For the lies, for the manipulation, for trying to steal from you, for turning Mom against you, for poisoning Diego's mind, for trying to make you into the villain when you were the only one who had been honest from the beginning." Maria listened without speaking, studying her sister's face for signs of sincerity. She had been burned so badly by Sofia's previous performances that she was reluctant to trust anything she said. But the woman sitting across from her looked genuinely broken, not calculating or manipulative. "I told myself I was doing it for Lucia, for her future," Sofia continued, her hands twisting in her lap. "I convinced myself that you owed us something, because we were family, because we had helped in small ways, because the house had become the center of our lives. But the truth is, I was jealous. I was jealous of your success, your independence, your ability to create something beautiful. And instead of working to build something for myself, I tried to take what you had built." The admission hung in the air between them. Maria had suspected jealousy was part of Sofia's motivation, but hearing it spoken aloud still felt like a revelation. It explained so much about the subtle undermining, the constant criticism disguised as concern, the way Sofia had always found fault with Maria's choices, even when they led to positive outcomes. "Why now?" Maria asked quietly. "Why are you telling me this now?" Sofia looked down at her hands, tears beginning to fall. "Because Lucia won't speak to me. Because she found out about the forged signature and the lies, and she said she was ashamed to be my daughter. Because I realized that in trying to secure her future, I destroyed our family and became someone she couldn't respect." The pain in Sofia's voice was genuine, and Maria felt her anger beginning to soften despite herself. "I don't expect forgiveness," Sofia said. "I just wanted you to know that I understand what I did was wrong. Unforgivably wrong. And I wanted you to know that you were right to fight back. You were right to stand up for yourself." They talked for 2 hours, the longest conversation they had had in 3 years. Sophia didn't ask to be welcomed back into the family, didn't request visits or reconciliation. She simply owned her mistakes and acknowledged the pain she had caused. As Sophia prepared to leave, she paused at the door. "The house is beautiful, Maria. It's exactly what you dreamed it would be. I'm sorry I tried to ruin that for you." After Sophia left, Maria walked through her home, seeing it with fresh eyes. The kitchen where she had first confronted her family's betrayal. The living room where legal documents had been spread like battle plans. The master bedroom where she had lain awake so many nights, wondering if she was doing the right thing. But she also saw the dining room where she and David now shared quiet dinners. The guest room where Lucia stayed during college breaks. The patio where she and her mother watched sunsets and talked about everything and nothing. The house had survived the assault on its ownership, and in doing so, it had become something even more valuable than Maria had originally envisioned. It wasn't just shelter or investment or proof of success. It was a testament to the principle that some things are worth fighting for, even when the fight is painful and the cost is high. That evening, Maria called Jennifer Walsh to thank her, once again for her representation during the lawsuit. "You know," Jennifer said, "in 30 years of practice, I've seen a lot of family property disputes. Most people either give in to keep the peace, or they fight and destroy all their relationships in the process. You found a third way." "What do you mean?" "You stood your ground without becoming bitter. You protected what was yours without losing who you are. That's rare, Maria. That's what real strength looks like." As Maria hung up the phone, she realized that Jennifer was right. The house she had built was still standing, both literally and figuratively. She had weathered the storm of family betrayal without becoming someone she couldn't live with. She had learned to distinguish between people who loved her and people who loved what she could give them. Most importantly, she had learned that sometimes, the most loving thing you can do is refuse to enable someone else's worst impulses, even when they're family. The title deed still bore only her name, but Maria had discovered something more valuable than legal ownership. She had found the strength to defend not just her property, but her principles. And in doing so, she had created something that no one could ever take away from her. The knowledge that she was capable of standing up for herself when it mattered most. The foundation she had watched being poured 7 years ago had held firm under pressure. But the real foundation, the one built from self-respect, determination, and the wisdom to know when to fight, had proven even stronger. As the desert stars emerged overhead, Maria sat on her back patio, listening to the sounds of her neighborhood settling into evening quiet. Tomorrow would bring new challenges and opportunities, but tonight, she was exactly where she belonged. In the home she had built, on the land she had chosen, surrounded by the peace that comes from knowing you've done the right thing, no matter how difficult it was. They had changed the locks on her heart, but she had changed something far more important. She had rewritten the ending to her own story, transforming a tale of betrayal into one of triumph, and a house into a true home.